Hello my loves. As I pull out my bullet journal to set up from March 2023, I want to talk for a bit about progress because when I was sketching out this theme, well, let's just say this is not what it looked like when I first began. My plan was to draw a ballerina on sticker paper that I could color in with alcohol marker, but as you can see, I definitely had two versions of this. Here's the first one, which was okay, but after spending a couple hours drawing ballerinas, I drew a different one and I really liked the second one better, and you can definitely see the comparisons between the two. One is a lot more skinny and awkward, and I felt like her body just was kind of boring as far as the posture and the position of her arms. But in the second one, I really experimented with a very different shape. I let the girl lay her head back and kind of just express herself with ballet. Her hands are fully extended and her right foot is in a point, and I don't know, something about this posture one and the way I drew her just looked so much more lifelike and just better in the second one, and I just love how this one turned out. So definitely made a lot of changes when I was sketching this theme, but after doing that first one and then going into my bullet journal, drawing a different drawings of ballerinas and just practicing on it, then I came back to the cover page, redrew this girl, and I really liked the second one better. So if anything, take this as a lesson to yourself. Definitely not the first time you draw something is going to be perfect, and that's okay, but if you try again, kind of work out the different details that you like about each drawing, the things that you don't like, and kind of implement that into the next try. It may be a little time consuming because it did take me a couple hours to sketch out this theme, but it came out with the result that I really love, and I'm definitely so happy I took the extra time to work on that. So anyway, speaking of, my March bullet journal setup this month is going to be ballerinas, and first I wanted to do a Swan Lake theme. For some reason, swans are just a nice little way to enter spring in my opinion, because you know, they're floating on a pond or a lake with mist, and it's like just the beginning of spring, just kind of hinting in. And so I really wanted to emphasize that along with the ballet Swan Lake in my bullet journal theme, and I also felt like that would be a good way to implement a lot of black, which I realized after doing my January bullet journal theme that I quite like including a lot of dark colors and contrast into my spreads. However, when I was sketching out the swans and all the different elements that I wanted to put into those spreads, I realized that a lake idea was really a little too, it just wasn't really clicking. I know I literally just said that it was like the perfect way to introduce spring, but I don't know, it just wasn't working for me, and so I decided to just kind of alter that idea. And so instead I brought out some florals inspired by Journal Away here on YouTube, an absolutely amazing artist. I adore her work, and she quite often does flowers backed by complete black backdrops, and I love that idea of contrast. So I decided to implement that with my ballerinas and create just a very simple ballerina theme. And here you have the cover page that I have taken so long to draw, it seems like. I did it on sticker paper because I'm using alcohol markers, and if you'll notice, alcohol markers actually bleed through normal paper, which is why I'm doing it on sticker paper and then sticking it into my bullet journal later. I have an entire video talking about how to use alcohol markers in your bullet journal, so if you want to check that out, I will link it down below, because I know there are quite a lot of differences between water-based markers and alcohol-based markers, and while I do use both in this setup, and we'll talk about more about the differences a little later, I definitely have a preference for alcohol markers as of late. So I wanted to implement this into my cover page, and once I finish completely drawing it, I'll just peel off the sticker paper, stick it back into my bullet journal, and it'll be like I drew directly into the pages. So as far as drawing this ballerina, like I mentioned earlier, I tried to really emphasize the shape of her body and the curve of her neck and the expression on her face to really show a dancer just expressing herself with her movements and her body. And I absolutely love how this final painting, or I guess drawing, turned out. I used a white gel pen to kind of emphasize the highlights, bring back a little more of those flowers that got lost when I outlined everything in black. And I will say, although the shading was definitely very light, I did try to add some shading in with the skin and the leotard and her hair. And overall, I just think she's just a beautiful little princess, and I do love how this cover page turned out. But we're definitely not done because this is only step one of what I plan to do for the cover page. I did feel like I wanted to add some lighter tones into the cover page too, which is why we're going to be working on this overlay section next. So as you guys saw, this cover page is actually a 2-page situation. So here, let's do the top part. I have these flowers in the top right and bottom left corners that I'm currently inking out, and they'll be very similar to the ones that were framing behind the ballerina in that particular picture. And after I ink these out, I'll just color them in similar colors that are actually in water-based markers. So here we have the non-alcohol based part of the video. Crayola Super Tips, Tombow brush pens, those normal pens that you usually hear bullet journal creators using, are all water-based, and they're nice because they don't bleed through the paper like I mentioned earlier. So because I had to use these for the drawings I was doing directly in the journal, I took some time to find pretty close matches between my Tombows and my Crayolas with the alcohol-based markers, which are, by the way, ahoohoos. So after finding the ones that matched, I decided to color in these flowers with the water-based, and so happy that they look very similar to the alcohol-based markers so that it looks like a cohesive picture, even though they're technically 2 different stationery products that I used for both types. So now comes the exciting part. I went to Walmart and bought myself a little X-Acto knife. Here she is, lovely and dangerous. And I decided to take the time, and let me tell you, it took a lot of time to very carefully go in and cut out this intersection. Now, if you're not a perfectionist like me, this could be easily done with a pair of scissors. Just kind of gently fold the page in half to get a little snip in the middle, and then you can go in and cut that little shape. But because I was really getting so close to the branches and trying to get as detailed of a cut around each of the flowers as I could, I really appreciated this X-Acto knife. I will say that it's not perfect because when it gets into the paper, it just wants to zoom straight, I guess, and it almost finds its own little veins in the paper that it wants to follow as well. So you kind of have to fight with it. Make sure you don't let the knife take you too far that you cut into the drawing on accident, and make sure that you maintain control of how you're doing it, because it definitely took some practice for me learning how to do it. Even after doing this first main portion, I guess you could say, that I cut out, I did go in afterwards and took about 20 minutes to go even more detailed into just curving around each of the leaves and flowers, which was a process on its own because, like I said, the knife really just wants to go straight. It doesn't want to curve. So it was just really a lot of detail work and time that went into this. And like I said, if you're not a perfectionist, this may not be for you, but it definitely was very intriguing for me, something I haven't tried before, and I love trying new things in my bullet journal, so I felt like this was a great way to kind of experiment. We have been spending so long on this cover page. Let me tell you, I literally took like an hour and a half probably to finish everything, but I love how the final part of it turns out, so I hope you guys also will like the finished product. So yeah, now that that part's done, I'm just going to pull out my picture from earlier, take off the back of the sticker paper, which makes it super easy and handy just to quickly slide it into the journal after lining it up with the dot grids, of course. One of the many reasons I love a bullet journal, because it makes it so easy to glue in things like this, just lined up with the dots, and then fold it over and we have a perfect little frame for my ballerina. And then now I'm just going to go in and color in with the Tombow brush pens like I mentioned earlier. As I'm finalizing the colors on the spread, I am realizing this looks a little similar to my theme from February 2022. If you haven't seen it, I will link that video, plan with me down below, so you can go check it out. But I did a crown theme and I used very minimal, simple line art drawings with a very similar pink and mauve color palette. And I really didn't intend for this to be so similar when I was first drawing it out, but basically when I was thinking in my head, I wanted to use a lot of dark colors, which is where the dark browns came in, and then the pink, because usually ballerina aesthetic kind of coincides with the color baby pink, and then of course the white and the black. So it all just kind of came together. Didn't mean for it to look so similar, but I'm not complaining about it because it is a color palette that I really do adore. So now we're on to the calendar page, and as you can see, I'm just inking in that very simple calendar in the middle. I have recently done a lot of one-page calendars because, if I'm being very honest, I don't use the calendar very much. It's a great way to have an overview of the entire month, and I love putting in, future exam dates rehearsal days for color guard and birthdays in here, but other than that I really don't use this spread very much, and I usually don't have more than one, maybe two events per day. So usually I can fit the calendar into a 1/2 spread, so I only use one page to do it, but I felt like switching things up this month and making a bigger calendar. So even if I don't really need all this space, I love how it looks to fill up the entire page. So I decided to try something different and just kind of go back to this different format. Here on the side I have a little ballerina drawing, and I absolutely love how she looks. I really wanted to try implementing her with the calendar, so although the original picture had her leaning on a bar as she does this dance move that I really wish I knew the name of, but I am not a ballerina. I'm a dancer, but I'm not a ballerina, so I don't know the name, but she's doing this lovely little leg lift, I guess, and instead of leaning on a bar, she's leaning on one of the lines of the calendar, and I feel like that was such a cute way to integrate her into the page. And then also on the left, I'm doing one of those very detailed, I guess, rose drawings with the flowers creeping out that almost look like cherry blossoms when I finally colored them in pink. It was kind of an awkward amount of space in this top corner that I didn't know what to do with, so I'm glad that I started implementing the flowers into this theme so I kind of fill up that part of the page. So going back to the ballerina drawing on the right, I've been focusing a lot more on just drawing for myself recently, not doing it in my bullet journal necessarily, but just in my sketchbook. I don't know if I mentioned this in a recent video, but I definitely have been trying to branch out. So if you know me, I love drawing profiles, I love drawing faces and getting the little details and the crevices of the face. For some reason, okay, for example, eye bags really intrigue me, and I love just drawing dark circles under people's eyes. I don't know why. But it's just an interesting anatomical thing that I love to draw. But recently I've been trying to branch out just from faces and also drawing full bodies. I'll put a picture here on the screen of a drawing that I did recently. I started out with a close-up of a face, but decided to venture into more parts of her clothing and her body and just different poses, I guess. And definitely a new, I guess, era of art for me, but I'm definitely excited to practice more with this. And I feel like what better way to do that than with ballerinas, because obviously they're in their poses and they're dancing and there's movement in all of these pictures. And not only do I want to encapsulate that, but I want to encapsulate correct anatomical drawings, making sure that they're proportionate, or at least almost proportionate, because sometimes, when you have a characterization of a person, if it's not going to be a completely realistic photo, they are going to be a little not exactly like human features. Their head might be a little bigger, their hands might be a little bigger, just to emphasize different parts of the drawing, whatever. But I want to focus on almost realistic anatomical features and practicing drawing hands and feet and legs that don't look bulky but can still be curvy and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to experiment with that this month throughout the weekly spreads. And I feel like I said, by sketching the cover page multiple times and sketching different ballerinas throughout these spreads, I've definitely practiced with different positions that I've obviously never drawn before, and I feel like it was a really good just skill for me to work on. So if you are an artist and are trying to, just try new things, experiment with something different, I definitely recommend ballerinas, because all the reference pictures that I found of them, I was just super intrigued to try to draw and work with depth to kind of show different, dance moves and everything. I feel like I'm rambling about this, but basically I'm just really excited to work on that more. And I feel like in my next video, I'm going to be talking more about drawing outside of your bullet journal, and also just maybe show you guys an alcohol marker drawing that I'm going to be doing. So hopefully that will be coming out in a week or so. So look out for that, because I'm very excited for that video. This calendar page is a little simple, I will admit, and I feel like there should be a few more darker elements in it. This is also something that carries over to the second page. I wish that it was a little darker and closer to the cover page, but that's really not that important. It's more of a functional page anyway as far as the calendar goes. Let's move on to the next page, which is going to be my gratitude and trackers page. So here on the left, I'm drawing another ballerina. We don't really have to talk too much about this. I feel like I just went on an entire rant, but I drew her in a different position. It was definitely interesting trying to figure out the depth of that leg behind her. And I felt like incorporating her a little bit into the spread as well, kind of like the calendar page. So she's kind of jutting into the line of gratitude a little bit, but I'm just going to kind of move the line around her tutu, and I just feel like this is a better way to kind of encompass her into the spread. I'm super excited about this theme because I have not really loved my past two themes in 2023. January I kind of didn't like, but I grew to love as I did some better weeklies, but February in particular I was just not a fan of almost from the minute I started filming, and I made it better. I worked on it, I practiced with it, and I liked some spreads I did in February, but a lot of it I didn't. And one of the things that I didn't like, which I'll talk about more in a future video, but was the way that I laid out my February spreads. I felt like the calendar page was just kind of awkward, and it was just like a drawing here and then words here and then text here and then boxes here, and it wasn't like everything was molded together into one big spread. So I have really tried to focus on integrating the ballerinas into the more productive parts of the spread, like the calendar and the gratitude page, to kind of make it feel like a whole thing and not just different elements next to each other. Speaking of layout, let's talk about this spread a little bit more, because I feel like all the ballerinas that I'm drawing are very, of course, tall and lengthy and very vertical as far as the drawing itself goes, of course, because they're, you know, up on point and they're reaching up to the ceiling. That's all like one big vertical line. Now, throughout the weekly spreads this month, I do intend to draw more sitting down poses and different, you know, experimentations, but I feel like the three that I used in this part of the video at least were very tall, and so that means that all of the spreads seemed very vertical, and that was something interesting because I definitely want to always add contrast into my spreads, and if they're all just really tall vertical spreads, it looks a lot of the same. So when I was sketching out the habit trackers on the right, I didn't really love how it seemed like a very fat spread, almost like everything is super horizontal, but I realized that this contrasts really well with the tall vertical lengthiness of all the ballerinas, and so I kind of just embraced the fact that it was kind of, you know, wider and chunkier on that page, because it definitely contrasts with the very tall and skinny gratitude layout. This might be a little in-depth, and if you're new to bullet journaling, this might be like, Sophie, you are going way in over your head, this is so unnecessary, but it's something that for me at least is pleasing to the eye, and I liked balancing this in my layouts, so for sure something that I look into. And I actually have an entire video about how to lay out and balance a bullet journaling spread that I did like 2 years ago. It may be a little outdated as far as the tips, but I'm sure there's a lot of good information in that video, so I'll link it down below if you want to go watch. Since March is the last month of the first quarter of the year, which is kind of crazy, I do want to take a few seconds to talk about some of my goals for March. So one, I want to continue to read from my 50 goals in 2023 goal. Right now I am actually 5 books ahead of schedule, but I'm not stopping anytime soon, so I still want to read 4 books this month. I want to continue to develop my night routine, which is actually going to be one of my habit trackers. I am a very big, unfortunate person that works really late into the night after, you know, school, rehearsal, homework, editing, so I want to make sure that I devote time at night for a little night routine. I want to hit 6.5 thousand subs, which, by the way, thank you so much for 6,000. Our little community is growing and I'm super excited about it. And I also want to graduate with top 5%, so I want to make all A's this semester, which I'm definitely in the progress of doing, so I'm super excited that I'm already working towards that goal. Like I mentioned earlier, I feel like the spread is definitely a little light. There's not enough black in it, there's not enough contrast, so I might go in a little later and add a little more somewhere, but for now this spread is done, and that concludes our March plan with me. So I hope you guys really enjoyed coming along with me. Hopefully this was a cozy little video as I set up my ballerina themed bullet journal spreads for the month of March. If you enjoyed, got some good inspiration from it, definitely subscribe because I post bullet journaling videos every week. As always, all the stationery in this video is linked in the description box below, along with all my social medias if you want to go follow me on Instagram, on Pinterest, Goodreads, Storygraph, all the things. And with that, I'm going to get going. Wishing you guys the most amazing week. And if you want to watch my February bullet journal setup, it'll be right here on the screen. Love you guys.